Acts chapter 27, you might read the story and it might call to mind things like, great shipwreck, seafaring tales. The deadliest catch came to my mind as I read through it, or a perfect storm, or even some scenes from Titanic, because this is an exciting story about shipwreck and people being lost at sea. But as we read this story, we need to keep in mind that seafaring in the ancient world was far more dangerous than it is in the modern world. See, in the modern world, we have things like radio and GPS and just communication tools that we actually tend to have a good idea of what's going on the seas and what's going on in ships. We lose ships very rarely, and if we do, it's usually because they want to be lost. So that's not the case in the ancient world. Mysteriously being lost at sea was far, far more common. People would go out for their sailing journeys or for their fishing journeys or for their travel. And the way they would travel, obviously, in the Mediterranean world was by boat. And because of the nature of travel on the seas, often people wouldn't return. They would just be lost at sea. And there was no way of knowing if a storm struck or what happened. Often this gave way to stories of tales of sea creatures and dangerous mythical animals that would attack as a way of explaining what happened to these ships. That was the common way of thinking about the sea and the ocean in the ancient world. It's a dangerous place, unpredictable, and there could even be mythical sea creatures and sea monsters out there. Things like the Loch Ness Monster or the whale of Moby Dick, and all of those sorts of narratives would pop up all over the place. And those sorts of narratives is the context for this story. And what Luke is trying to tell us in this story is that the God of Paul, who is the God of the Bible, our God, the oceans and the seas are no match for him. He is powerful above them. That's the message of this story. So if you've read the story, Luke, he writes this from a first person perspective. He uses the pronoun we because he is aboard this ship with Paul. Paul warns them, don't go sailing. Things are looking very bad. It's getting to that time of year after the Day of Atonement, kind of September, October, where the Adriatic Sea and the Mediterranean Sea are at their worst. It's kind of their winter time. And so it's dangerous to sail. So Paul says, let's bunker down and spend the winter here. But they don't listen, maybe because they have a deadline to meet or something like that. And before long, they find themselves in a very serious situation. For 14 nights, we're told, they go without food and they are just up against it. But Paul tells them, God has sent an angel to me, and the angel has said to me that no lives will be lost, just this ship. And that is exactly how this episode plays out. People try to go into the lifeboat, but Paul says, don't go into the lifeboat. If you leave this ship, you will not be saved. And then eventually the ship is washed up on a sandbar near the island of Malta. The sandbar destroys the ship, but every single life aboard the ship was saved, just as the angel had said to Paul. Now, I think what's really amazing about this story is that God speaks to Paul and tells him that everything will be okay for the lives aboard. It'll be a trying and difficult episode, but everything will pan out okay. No lives will be lost. And Paul listens to God's word, and he acts in a cool, calm, and collected way as a response to hearing God say these things. So he's happy to even say grace before they eat what they probably think is going to be their last meal. Paul stands there and he prays for the food, and then he serves it to them because he is sure that it's going to play out the way that God has told him it is going to play out. Paul demonstrates a great trust in God's word in this story. And he knows that the God that he worships is the God who controls the seas, is providential over all things. I think it's really important to notice in this story that God could have chosen to stop the storm. That could have been one way that God could bring about their deliverance, but that's not what he does. He doesn't choose to stop the storm. He just tells Paul that it will be okay for everyone on board, and that's exactly how it plays out. And this adds credibility to the God who Paul worships in the eyes of all of the 276 crew aboard. And it adds credibility to the God that Paul worships as he heads to Rome to face Caesar and give a justification for his actions and his faith. Hopefully you're today encouraged by the God who is capable to deliver, the God whose word can be trusted, and we can live in light of that today. See ya.